going on. I don't know what that is.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, and you connected.
All right. What's going on there? There's all kinds of panels on this thing. Look at that.
Yeah, we actually just recommend people ignore the panels, let Arib handle all of that, and Mark, and I think Mark has muted himself. So, so Jonathan, how's your day?
Good. Really busy. We're trying to wrap up a bunch of stuff right before heading out of town for a few days. So, but happy to be here. Thanks for including us in your list of stories. You got a lot of my friends on that list, I saw.
Yeah, well, good. By the way, I won't hold it against you that you're from Brookings.
Uh-oh. Do you have
There's a story
ties there? Do you have ties there?
No, I was a prof at Augustana for a number of years.
Oh, is that right? Sioux
Yeah,
Falls is.
and I never appreciated all the rabbits getting thrown onto our floor. I was a basketball coach for a while also, so.
They are passionate about basketball up here, that's for sure.
Yeah, and and I'm probably.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
I don't know what's going on here. Anyway, I'm probably one of the few people that doesn't live in South Dakota that knows where Esteline is too.
Yeah, really. Yep. A lot of people don't even know where South Dakota is.
Yeah, that's right. We're right at the top of the hour, Mark. If you're out there, why don't we go ahead and start recording if you haven't already, and we'll get going here.
So this is filmed live, so it's recorded as well as there may be some interactions with the audience, or no?
Yes, that's right. There'll be so the audience will be able to interact with us as we talk. We'll ask them to ask questions. Everybody, if you've got them, please do that. And then we get a lot more listeners that are replay. So we basically, and we turn this into a podcast also. So it'll become both verbal and listening wise. Sometimes not as good as it is because you're able to watch the video also if it's in the webinar mode, but lots of different ways in which to interact with it. So
That'll be great.
So Jonathan, I noticed, and Arib's screening here on this is a cool picture, by the way, which is obviously your private laboratory. But I noticed another Lundgren on the page here a little bit further down. Is that somehow related?
Yep. So Ian might be on that web page. That's my boy. He's just turned 18, and he can sight ID a rabbit beetle walking around out in the yard. So I think that says something about some of his skills there. And then Christina Lynn, my partner, is also on that page. She actually made the page for it. So.
Oh, cool.
Mm-hmm.
So
families are important, aren't they?
Yeah, they really are. That's so cool. So we're going to just make this very informal. You and I are just going to chat. We're going to let Arib scroll. He's usually really good about sort of following what we're talking about, and he'll go to a different place on your page, and maybe it'll interact and relate to what it is that we're talking about. And we're just going to have fun here and just get to know each other a little bit, talk, and the audience can weigh in with questions whenever they have them, or comments or other thoughts. So.
Okay, great. So I don't need to give any presentation at all.
Nope, unless you choose to. If you'd like to, we're more than happy to have you do that too. But otherwise, we'll just keep this informal. And then usually when we get really cool speakers, we ask them if they'd come back again sometime. And then at that point, we'd love to have a presentation or even a course. So are you a long-term South Dakotan?
Well, I moved in 2004, so it's like 17 years now, which is, yeah, that's a long time, I guess. I'm getting old.
And before that, it looked like entomology was an education area. Tell
Yeah,
us
I
a
grew
little
up.
bit about your, yeah.
I grew up in Minnesota, which is, not too far away, and ended up taking an entomology course in college, and it just sort of decided that's what I'd like to sort of specialize on, and it was a good choice. Um, Entomologists like to joke that we're biologists with jobs because there's a lot of bugs that need to be addressed. But I never really looked at insects that way from a pest perspective. And that is kind of an interesting difference. I mean, entomologists are different than a lot of other folks that are working in like agronomy and things like that. Because, I mean, we love the organisms that we're studying. I mean, that's the reason why we got in. Weed scientists don't necessarily love weeds, right? And plant pathologists don't, I mean, they're not like passionate about, a disease that they just have really, but with insects, we really like those things. And that does kind of change your perspective on how to manage everything.
And did eventually the move to South Dakota get motivated by your ability to buy land there and having it maybe be cheaper than, let's say, Minnesota? By the way, I was in Mankato over the weekend.
Oh, you
I
were?
went to school. I went to school in Mankato. Met my wife, who's from Fairfax, Minnesota, also. So we actually did go to Fairfax also over a weekend. But I was there for a reunion and a homecoming for my college, and so.
Colors are changing right now, aren't they?
Yeah, although I'll tell you, it's certainly dry. I don't know if you've been as dry as they are over just a little bit farther
horrible.
south and east of you.
Yeah, it was horrible this year.
Yeah. So anyway, back to my question. What motivated the move to South Dakota?
Yeah, so I ended up getting my doctorate in entomology down in Illinois, and then pretty much right out of grad school, I got a job as a research entomologist at the USDA lab at Lundgren, and I worked there for 11 years, and then quit and decided to do something totally different and kind of a little bit crazy because I had a nice padded federal position that I could be very comfortable in for the rest of my life, but I decided to do something much different and got out of the scientific matrix in order to try to use science to help people and to help save the planet and to help save us. So I thought that maybe a good way of doing that would be to sort of get out of that matrix and rethink how science is applied to our food system. And so I could choose anywhere to do that all around the country, and decided to stay put. And there was a lot of reasons for that. Number one, you did mention it's much cheaper to live here than many other places in the US. But also, this is ground zero for where change has to happen, right?
Right.
We're on the interface of corn and soybeans and more arid regions of the U.S. where grazing and diverse crop rotations are trying to take hold, and we're one of the top honey producing states, and so this is a very strategic location from which to shoot from around the U.S.
So as you made that change and you went from the federal entomology situation to now a regenerative farmer, did you meet some resistance from some of those colleagues that you'd been with for years in the more traditional ag realm, where maybe at least funding was coming from places that you aren't probably very highly willing to endorse today? And places like potentially things like Cargill or Monsanto or others like that?
Yeah, so I tried changing the system from within, right? I started meeting the farmers that were telling me that there was a better way, right? That by focusing on soil health and regenerative practices of conserving life on their farms, they just didn't have pest problems anymore. And I went out and looked at their farms, and they weren't kidding, and there was something going on there. And so we used our science to try to validate that and showed that our food system is really brittle right now. We do need to be thinking outside of the box a little bit. And then I also met some beekeepers, and these beekeepers were telling me, wait a minute, the pesticides are killing our bees. And I said, no. The data is not, sure, that might be a contributor, but there's multifaceted reasons for the bee die-off, and we need to be looking at, and they're like, no, Jeff, come on out. You come on out and watch our bees die in front of the hives. And then you tell us the pesticides that they just sprayed next door are the ones that are doing it. And that changed things. We did the research, and sure enough, the pesticides are killing their bees. And that was enough that made it much more challenging to do my science. I went from being one of the top scientists in the U.S. I was given an award by Obama in the White House to having science suppressed, and that's not okay. So makes you question why you got into this whole thing, doesn't it?
Yeah. So again, I'm a regenerative rancher and farmer, and have been for the last 15 years. And we live off the income from our farm. If we're not profitable, we're looking for other ways to get income. So we have to be in a situation where we're making money doing what we're doing. And I know that's at least as I read your website, that's an attitude that you take also. What's real interesting is the science that you've been able to combine with the farming. That one cover page on your website with the picture of three people enjoying themselves around a lab table with microscopes and a fume hood in the background, and all of that means that you've been able to take that science from a highly funded, very probably well-stocked laboratory situation at the federal level to maybe not as highly funded as you'd like, but and needing to make use of space more efficiently and so on, at the private research level that it looks like you're doing now. So tell us about that. How have you been able to maintain the research side of things in the private setting that you're in now, and how does that work compared to the way it worked when you were in the public setting?
Well, it's a different world, and there isn't an instruction book for what we're trying to do. Farmer-driven science, huh? What a concept. When I got started 6 seasons ago, well, number one, science has to change if we're going to change our food system. And that was the basis for why we started Ichthyosis Foundation and Blue Dasher Farm, is this integration that scientists need to be farmers. that there's a whole set of metrics that scientists are assessing themselves by, peer-reviewed papers and committees that you've served on, and how many millions of dollars you brought in grant funds that funds the bureaucracy of an institution, and how many graduate students you pump through the puppy mill. And I looked at those those metrics, and it was like, which of these do farmers care about? And it was zero. But the only way you get a job in science is by adhering to those metrics of success. And I was like, wait a minute. I mean, there's this gulf. The things that are important to the farming community are completely and utterly different than what's important to the scientific community. And we aren't running the same path anymore. And so we had to reintegrate science back into food communities. And I still think that that's the case. And that really is what drove this, right? So I'm a farmer, I'm a beekeeper, I'm a rancher. But Blue Dasher Farm is also kind of a training ground for the next generation of scientists. And so farm income is certainly important in that training, but we also have a really, really active research program. I have 6 doctoral level scientists that are now on staff, and we're working on, I think, something like 9 states and 2 Canadian provinces, trying to generate the data to change our food system that farmers need for making decisions as well as policymakers. So that's been a really exciting evolution.
So the farm that you're on, Blue Dasher, was it degraded pretty significantly when you acquired it?
They gave us the land. They said this land does not have any value. So if you want to buy the house and the buildings, if you want the land, that's fine. You can have that too. But if you don't want it, then let us know. I mean, we might be able to find somebody to take it, because it's all this like perennial grassland and like rolling hills and wetlands and crap like that nobody really wants. Well, we've taken that and turned that into a really amazing place through some management decisions and incorporation of animals and bees into the farming operation. We've actually farmed those native grasses for seed, and we've established an orchard and the prairie. We woke it up, and through burns and grazing, we have an unbroken prairie that's never been tilled that is really spectacular in its diversity. It was all the seed was there and it was waiting to be woken up. But the brome had kind of taken everything over. So yeah. So no, the farm really wasn't degraded. I think I battled a lot of herbicide residues. That was one of the things that they were able to use as much as they wanted to, was pesticides. So I think that that's really affected things. But since we backed off and started incorporating the right sorts of management, we've seen things really wake up. Yeah, it's been an exciting journey.
By the way, one quick question from the audience. Lynn asks, which Canadian province, and she must be Canadian, so are you working with?
Manitoba and Saskatchewan. I've been to Quebec and Ontario speaking with farmers and stuff. But, those are the 2 that we had. I think we had sampled 60 farms or something like that every year for 3 years as they transitioned over to regenerative.
And when you work with other farmers anywhere, it doesn't have to be just the Canadian circumstance, how is that interaction? Do they, are you acting as an advisor, a mentor, and how does the relationship work?
No, they're the experts. What are you kidding me? So we learn from them. We're after the leaders in the field as well as people that are interested in transitioning, and we want to learn what it is that they're doing that is making them so successful. And yeah, we're boots on the ground on a bunch of different farms all over the U.S., more than 200 this year. We'll be up to 1,000 of them by 2023 annually. It's called the 1,000 Farm Initiative. It's one of the largest agroecological experiments that's ever been even attempted. But it's what's needed right now.
And how are they collecting data that then is going to be used, assume at some point, or is already being used and compiled to create long-term positive interaction from this process?
We're collecting the data. So we
Okay.
go out to their farms and we actually do that data collection. We're hoping that eventually we'll be able to rely on sort of farmer scientists to collect their own information about their sites. But for right now, the spine of this experiment really has to be conducted by our team if we are going to keep the methods consistent across all these different geographic regions, as well as different commodities or food systems.
So just a little bit more about a little of my past that has some relevance here is back in the early 80s, 82 through 85, I was involved with a group out of Minnesota called American Energy Farming Systems that made the effort to create a new crop for the country called Jerusalem artichokes. And in that process, they hired the company that I had in the consulting realm at that point to do what you're doing, but with their farmers throughout the United States. And at one point, I had 15 agronomists / scientists out in the field in the summer of 83 and 84, gathering data and doing probably somewhat similar to what you're doing. We did ask these folks to be farmer scientists, though, more, and mainly it was collecting weather data. Remember, the weather data at that time wasn't nearly as digital as it is today. And so, we asked them to collect rainfall amounts, temperature levels, and do, observations at least that we wouldn't be able to do unless we were there literally all the time. And then we kept journals, and I still have 5 18-inch file boxes full of that data, which unfortunately never really got to be used to the level that it should have been, because this company in American Energy Farming Systems went under. There's a large story there. This crop, which went from literally nothing to almost 5 million acres, and they were trying to use the soybean model, which is an interesting one, which very few people even know, related to when soy went from nothing prior to World War II up to, hundreds of millions of acres, because of a market really that was unfulfilled because of Asian vegetable oil that was no longer available during World War II. And then the Hubbard guy and the Cargill guy, both inventing almost simultaneously an extraction methodology for soy. All those things came together, and that's what created the soy explosion that occurred. But anyway, at some point, I'd love to talk with you more about this now old, it's 30-year-old data now, but still data, still valuable, from hundreds of farmers, which are probably all still farming, or a lot of them are, their families are, their offspring are, that could be useful in some of the things that you're doing, and that we have really just never had the time to be able to analyze.
Yeah, that's so cool. Yeah, no, that's there's a lot of data that's sitting around out there, and we're doing our best to try to get it out, publish we publish it as quickly as we try to gather it. So, and it's a struggle, that's for sure.
So who are some of your heroes in the regenerative ag area?
Oh gosh, I started talking with folks before regenerative was really a word. I remember going down to no-till on the plains down in Salina, Kansas.
Yeah.
Brian Lindley really brought together a number of wonderful people that I think was that no-till movement that kind of became the cover crop movement, that kind of became the regenerative agriculture movement. Cover crops was weird, wacky stuff back when we started talking at those tables, but that incubator was really, I think, what inspired a lot of what is now being dubbed as regenerative farming. Who are my heroes? Dwayne Beck is a wonderful guy. I really respect the heck out of him. Will Harris is, I could listen to him all day long. It was nice for him to be able to speak to some of our people at our field day. Gail Fuller has always been a good friend. He's down in Kansas. Gabe Brown is a good friend. Kelly Mulville out in California. These are people that I really respect a lot.
Cool. Well, as you know, all of those have been guests of ours at one time or another, every one of those names. And we try our best to get as many people that sort of try to be economic, do things to make a little money, making the planet better. And in the ag area, which is my passion, it's always great when we can get somebody like yourself. And tell you, somebody eventually you're going to want to follow more is Zebulon Harrell in New Zealand. And Zebulon is running 11,000 ewe lamb in a completely regenerative setting, where he inherited from his father the complete opposite, a little bit like Gabe did with what he did and what Will did, frankly. But Will's situation was, not that long ago, I guess, if I remember right, 91, when he told his dad, I'm not going to stay here. We're not going to continue this legacy if I'm not given the ability to do this the way I want to do it, which isn't going to be anything like you did it, Dad. And what Will's done with not just his own economy and the economy of the farm and ranches there, but the whole community economy. He's revitalized Bluffton. Bluffton wouldn't have existed today. It'd be under. And the same thing, as you know, is probably becoming the case with many South Dakotan communities, where they're going the way of the dinosaur unless they dramatically come in and change things. So
yeah, I think a lot of them think, a lot of people that kind of grew up in the current system think that the answer is consolidation and industrialization and increasing efficiency and all of those items. But that, I mean, even in our own county, yesterday we were at a meeting trying to stop a large slaughterhouse from moving in down the road, and it's like, development, that's what matters. And it's like, boy, we got to be thinking long term here, guys, because these CAFO builders, the only ones that make money off of that are the CAFO builders themselves. The farmers lose. So, but it sure doesn't look good on paper, doesn't it?
no, yeah, that's right. Real quick, Lynn's asked a couple others really nice questions, and I'm going to start with the longer one from her. Do you have any recommendations on how to deal with buttercup overtaking one's pastures? That's something I know some farmers that are doing their best to be regenerative are dealing with. Some are saying that the only way to deal with it is herbicide. It would be great to have another way.
Okay, I wonder where they're at.
Yeah, Lynn, tell us where you're at. I'm guessing she's in Canada somewhere because she's the one that asked, and I'm guessing Lynn is a lady. I don't know that for sure, but Lynn, would you tell us where you're at in the world? She also asked, how are your bees doing this year? And I don't know whether that means that it's a tough year for her with bees wherever she's at, but how has this year been for your bees?
Oh, well, first off, let's answer the buttercup question. I mean, yeah, we've got certain species that tend to adapt. Pests are never the problem, right? Pests are always a symptom. Let's figure out what the problem is. More often than not, it's too much disturbance, not enough diversity. What tools do we have at our disposal to help to manage plant communities? We have fire, we have grazing, we have competition. And so generally, those are the tools that I advocate for people to try to use, especially in pasture systems. If you're grazing that, maybe integrate some other animals into your herd. Things like goats or sheep might enjoy eating that buttercup, whereas cattle may avoid it, for example. A burn every few years can really wake things up, and the land up here is adapted to that, and chances are real good buttercup isn't. So waking up some of those native warm season grasses and cool season grasses with a burn might be just what the doctor ordered. Bees, how'd they do this year? Well, they're not all dead yet. We had almost no honey produced, though. It was so dry. And a lot of people think, oh, there's flowers out there, therefore the bees must be making honey. In reality, there's very few honey making days because everything has to be just right. You've got to have the flowers, sure, but you also have to have the right weather. And if it rains, you got 2 days where where all the nectar is kind of washed out. And if it doesn't rain, you may have flowers, but you're not producing any nectar. If it gets too windy, the bees can't get to those flowers very well. And so really there's a couple of sweet spot days every year. And we had probably 0 of those this year. So the bees kind of limped along, combining hives, trying to goose them up before the winter time. But we've never had our bees survive the winter.
She, by the way, she said that she's in Canada near Edmonton, but the people in the group that she's in that related to her question about buttercup are from the northwestern U.S., so it must be, Washington, Oregon, so on. But then she says that's an idea related to the grazing and burning. By the way, Lynn, a little bit from my perspective, because we have buttercup that could be a problem here, although I would not say that it's been one for at least a number of years, because we have a very diversified grazing situation with browsers as well as grazers, as well as combos animals, which goats can certainly be the latter. But we're unique in that we have one of the larger and we're very strong advocates of alpacas. And alpacas will eat anything.
We want some alpacas really badly out of Dasher.
Well, we'll have to talk about how maybe we can help you do that at some point.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
But they will literally graze, browse, do both, and they can be pastured with goats, they can be pastured with cattle, they can be pastured with horses. So they're very, very adaptable to lots of circumstances. And anyway, we do selectively burn also. We have a very opposite climate situation as you have, Jonathan. We're an arid, high altitude desert, essentially mountainy desert. So 14 inches of annual rainfall, and most of that is snow. And so like this year, I doubt we had an inch since our
Wow.
snow, and that's really low. But we changed our grazing because of that. I mean, we changed and we took our temporary pastures and shortened the time frame that we used them. And you know, it was more work for us clearly, but we saw that rainfall, unless we got a change, and it never happened, was going to force us to go. And therefore, if you come to our farm now, you would not know that we just went through the driest summer, at least in the 15 years that we've been here, because we just didn't let grazing, you know, occur in a overgrazing situation. So
Yeah. That's awesome. Where is,
So-
are you in New Mexico or whereabouts?
no, I'm north of Denver, in the foothills between Fort Collins and Boulder, and so in a what we call hogback area. So I live in what most people, you'd call it in South Dakota, a canyon. So our lower end of where we have pastures that are about a half a mile wide is a 5,300 feet, and then the canyon walls that go up, and it's not straight up, but that go up like this are 800 feet higher on one side and 700 feet higher on the other. And
Wow.
our geology is interesting in that we have granitic geology on the east side of our valley. Our valley's straight north-south, and on the east side is granitic, and on the west side is sandstone. So historically, you know, this was a lake on the west side, and on the east side was an upwelling. So because of that, we have a whole different vegetation status on both those sides, which we also have managed grazing based on that. And then we always tell people, we take the same perspective that Mark Shepard does, which is stun, that we try to do most of the work in a pasture area or an agricultural growth area at the front end by putting berms and swales in place, getting in place so we can manage that runoff that we get, which occurs in big chunks usually. Again, didn't happen this year, but anyway, stun being strikingly terrific utter neglect. So once we get something established, we try to do as little as possible in terms of additional management if it's working. So again, if it's not broken, don't fix it. So.
Wow, that's great. I'd love to see it sometime. I'll bet it's beautiful there. Actually, I'll be in your area in a month.
Well, come and visit. It still could be very nice, and we could have gotten winter started by then, just like you could have. But yeah, love to have you come by and shoot. I'd love to do the same, to visit Blue Gasher at some point. So our ranch is called Mountain Sky Ranch, and we own about 45 acres, but then we have grazing rights on about 1,000 acres that surround us. So we have cattle so we do a feeder cattle situation where we buy moms and babies in May, put them out in this area that we can rotate. And then about now, we're going to be a little earlier this year than most years because of the drought. But then we just take them off, and during that time, we don't feed them. They live off the land, and we have water in about 3 different locations that we have to make sure we give them access to. But other than that, again, it's we make our money on the pounds gained by those calves during that time, and we buy them at auction in the spring, and we sell them at auction in the fall. It's just as easy as it can be.
Well, that's awesome. Yep, sounds like a good plan.
So tell us about how have you attracted and the amazing looking staff that you have. Do those people find you? Do you go out and find them? And
It
I love
boggles my mind how we have attracted such talented people to kind of a pretty isolated pocket in South Dakota. But we've
Yeah.
had people from all over the country as well as all over the planet that have come to be a part of this. And so, our mission is much bigger than ourselves, and I think that has a lot to do with why we've attracted such wonderful people.
And how about the lodging situation for people? Do you have on-site lodging, or do people living out in the community and so on? How's that work?
For the most part, we've had people live. We have a fairly large house, and we've had people live in the basement before, but we've kind of gotten away from that for a little while here, at least, and we'll see where life goes. But for right now, almost all of the staff ends up living in neighboring communities, and then they carpool in every morning and carpool out every evening. So it works out pretty well. And then when we need to go someplace, we have well, my kids are getting older, and so we have them or their friends and stay there and help out on the farm while we go off and stir the pot for a while.
And how are you interacting with any of the state institutions, for example? So with any interaction with SDSU or USD or
we have great interactions with local universities, USDA, NRCS, USGS in the area. I have adjunct status at the university, and so I can put some graduate students through. We do have graduate students that that go through South Dakota State, but we also have I have a master's student that's going through Nebraska and a doctoral student who's going through UC Davis. So we're free agents. We don't have to have our students end up coming from just or getting their degrees through just one institution. That's been kind of nice.
So what's the genesis of the two names you have? Ecdysis, that one you're going to have to really even help me, because I probably should know what that means, but I don't. And then Blue Dasher must have something related to just either local folklore or history or something. It's a little more, little broader name.
Yeah.
So tell us the genesis of both of those.
You bet. Ecdysis is a geeky entomology term. It means shedding the old skin or metamorphosis. And so that seemed like it was awfully appropriate to what we were trying to do. And then Blue Dasher is a dragonfly species. And dragonflies are wonderful critters. They're great ecosystem indicators, wonderful predators, and just a good barometer of environmental health. And so we picked that Blue Dasher. We loved the name, and that was what we decided on. So
do you have any aquatic communities on your farm or broadly across those that you work with?
Yeah, we work with Ducks Unlimited up here, looking at how agricultural practices affect ephemeral wetlands of the area. And on Blue Dasher Farm itself, we have wetlands and a pond. Blue Dasher isn't very large; it's only 53 acres. But on that 53 acres, we have a lot packed in, and so it's a neat place.
Well, again, at some point, maybe we can talk more about potential collaboration there. I by not by training initially, but by experience, I've become an aquatic entomologist in a pretty big way. And I actually did do my PhD work at the University of Idaho on the Snake River system, which is a run-of-the-river reservoir system now, unfortunately, but was looking at chironomids and mayflies and caddis and any number of other aquatic insects. And I've always been a big fly fisherman, so clearly the more you understand about the life cycles of those insects, the better you can do with tying flies and understanding how fish are going to want to bite them, want to grab them at least. So anyway, we have a system of 18 ponds in which we have different fish in a variety of them. We're able to screen them and keep them isolated. And in the biggest of those, which is about 2.5 acres, we have 11,000 smallmouth bass that are 1/2 pound and bigger. So they're edible. The reason we know that number is that we do an annual harvest in December. So it's coming up here fairly soon. Electroshocking, and then we clip, and we know when we are able to sample every year what our population is, and we sell those fish to caterers and food truck folks and a variety of people that I've met through the years, and we make a party out of our one day of harvesting this fish, and then they'll have 1 or 2 special menu days with those fish, and we make some money off of it. And essentially, other than that, we don't do anything. We don't feed them. They're naturally fed by a combination of crayfish, which is probably the most important forage for our larger fish, and then obviously insects for the smaller fish, of all different. And we're 6 ounces away from the state record smallmouth in this pond. So at some point in the near future, we will have the state record that'll come out of this pond. So
that's really cool.
So of both agriculture as well as recreation of the fishing side. So,
neat. Very cool.
So,
yeah, we love the idea of sort of farming fish and that and trying to integrate aquatic, or aquaponics or whatever. I don't know what you want to call it, but raising up some fish out of as one of the outputs of Blue Dasher. We'll see. I think that'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah, well, and the ability to do floating rafts, much like the Mayans did historically, still do. Some of their in Mexico, and then the Chinese have been doing it now, to where you can have PVC drainage pipe, for example, 6-inch on rafts, and that they can become literally shade for fish, because fish don't like to be visible and don't like in the sunlight, and they'll just float around in a pond situation. Doesn't need to be even very big pond, and the water going through the pipe will actually provide enough water and nutrients for plants to grow. So you can use Dixie cups in holes in the pipe and styrofoam to cause it to float, and let the water movement through wind and the movement of just waves and such be able to flood the plants. And you can grow, greens and other things depending on the time of the year. And then you do have to separate the roots from the fish somehow, which we usually put a wire mesh, like a screen mesh underneath, so the fish can't get to the roots. But other than that, it's a really cool way to both grow plants that can be edible, as well as add value to the fish that are in ponds too. So
cool. Yeah, I'd love to see that system. It'd be a lot of fun.
So we got about 12, 13 minutes left here. Let me see what other questions we might have. I don't see any yet, but if people in the audience, if you have questions, please put them into the chat area, and we'll make sure that we get Jonathan asked. But tell us some ways that our group might be able to help you. We have 30,000 people that are a part of our community somewhere all around the world. And we're always looking to help those people that we think are doing things that are the right way. And your group certainly is doing that. So what are ways that our community could be helping you?
Well, there's a lot of different ways. Funding is always appreciated. This research doesn't do itself. And it's not something that large granting opportunities end up funding very often. And so we really rely on donations as part of our scientific endeavors. We're also looking for our places to do our science. So if you have an interesting farm that you'd like included in Thousand Farm Initiative, then please, let us know, holler at me. And hopefully there will be a link to our social media and my email address so that people could do just that. And then make sure that the science is reaching the decision makers. So we have a number of published studies now, and those can be used for developing decision-making frameworks. Maybe it's by farmers themselves, or maybe it's by policymakers, maybe it's by other members of the community. So those would be some really important ways to help.
Very cool. And I'm assuming Arib's already scrolled through to where some of the donation can occur. And do you have a form that people will fill out, or they just reach out to you if they have a farm that they might want to be entered into your Thousand Farm Initiative?
Yeah, we've got a form that's available, and but reach out to me via email and we can see what we can do. Right now, we're focusing on the U.S., continental U.S., and maybe a little bit in Canada. So, but hopefully, Thousand Farm will be wildly successful, and we'll be able to implement it all over the planet.
Very cool. What other insight would you like to give to our audience here today about what you're up to and what you're doing?
Boy, I don't know. I think that yeah, it's an exciting time. There's a lot of things that are challenging the planet, aren't there? And it's really easy to focus on all those problems. But at the same time, we have some tremendous solutions too. And regenerative agriculture is one of those solutions. I mean, we can use this to not only heal, a farming operation, but also we can use this to heal the planet. So that's really exciting. Now it's just a matter of getting things done. And we need people that are to take bold action. The days of waving our hands and pamphleteering and just talking about things, and those are behind us. There's a real sense of urgency. We need people doing something, and so we really are trying to practice what we preach in that, and we work very hard every day trying to bring our food system around into something that can be really productive for both farmers as well as the planet.
Do you get enough curiosity or any curiosity from industrial farmers that are around you, and you're, I know they're within very close proximity of where you're at? Do they come by and at least show some interest on a curiosity perspective?
More and more often, yes. Change comes. I'm a scientist, right? So are you. But I'm also a farmer. Change. Yeah, we're not a data-driven society, and we may be getting to be a less data-driven society. And so that's real humbling. We need data in order to change our food system in a healthy way, but it's not sufficient to change behavior. What's necessary to change behavior is relationships and trust. And that's not something they teach you in graduate school. And so, how are we working within our own community? We're trying very, very hard to develop those relationships and friendships that can help to inspire change. And we have some conservative neighbors that will come by and they'll start talking to you a little bit, and eventually the conversation turns to maybe grazing some cover crops on that field crop ground, and incorporating some soybeans or rye into their soybeans just to see how it worked, and those kinds of ideas. So they're watching, and I'm not saying we're the ones that are changing, but certainly we're allowing them to realize they're not alone.
Yeah, and I used to always say, I haven't said this in a long time, but people have listened to me and us for 5 years know that I've said this, which is, you ask a farmer, a typical industrial farmer, why do you sell almost everything you have through the elevator? And they'll say, well, my dad did it that way, and my grandpa did it that way, and that's the reason I do it that way.
Yeah.
Is that a really good reason to be doing things? So
No.
anyway, my mother's side of my family were immigrants from Pennsylvania to Oklahoma in the land rush of the early 1900s. And my cousins are now retiring from essentially running the family farms, and my second cousins or their kids are now the ones that are running, and they're in Oklahoma, and they're industrial. They still, it's what are yields, what's our corn yield, what's our wheat yield, what's our, how do we increase that yield year after year, how much ammonia do we use, and they don't have any soil, they have dirt. And they readily admit that. And they believe that they can continue to be generational, and I don't think they have a chance to be. I think this generation, my second cousins, are probably in for those types of farms there in Oklahoma. So
Yeah, I think so too. I'll give presentations for farmers all over the planet and talk to them about regenerative agriculture. Sometimes I'll get them, raising their hands afterwards. That sounds really good. That's regenerative farming thing, but what's it going to cost me to change? I'm invested in this current system. And I tell them that's the wrong question. What's it going to cost you not to change? It's going to cost you your farm. It's probably going to cost you your grandkids. Is that worth it? I don't think it is. And I think we're living through a pretty massive evolutionary event right now. And folks that are clinging on to the old way of doing things in an industrial manner aren't going to be around much longer, unfortunately. And hopefully we can help them, everybody, to adapt and survive in this new world.
Yeah. Well, we are right about at the top of the hour, and we try to be respectful to you as our speaker, as well as to our audience. Anybody in the audience, if you've got any other questions, put them in here real quickly. We just got 3 or 4 minutes. And Arib, do you have any questions for Jonathan?
I don't have any questions. I was admiring the whole thing, like what he's doing and what he has accomplished, I guess. So moving through his website, moving through his Instagram page, I love the pictures, I love the animals. So I think it's a shout out. So, thank you so much for being here.
Jonathan, Arib is in Pakistan, in a very urban area, but over the years he's learned a lot about agricultural practices, and
It's great.
My grandfather used to do it, and because I'm in a region of Punjab, which is a very agricultural area, but I have lived in the urban area basically. So yeah, I think that connects me back to my heritage, I guess. I can understand things there and then go back and talk about it. Thank you so much.
That's awesome. No, thanks, man.
And you're young, my friend. You're going to have a lot more influence over time than Jonathan and I, who are a little bit older than you. And so your youth will serve you value in that. So Jonathan, any last thoughts as we wrap up here?
Nope, I think that just reminding people that there's a lot of hope right now, and it's an exciting time of change, and to be part of that change.
And then Lynn just threw in a rather long comment question. I'm just going to get to this real quickly. So let's see. Sort of off topic, and speaking of studies, Stefan Sobkowiak, don't know that name, so talks about a study done on his farm on spraying milkway to prevent fungus issues, but nothing was ever published, probably because it did so well. Do you know if there's any way to get one's hands on data for a study like that? I'd love to see someone grab that data and actually publish a paper on it.
Well, aside from talking to the author or the scientist, there really isn't a way, unless, yeah, depending on where it was conducted, I guess. Maybe the institution has a copy of it, but.
And then here's a really cool one. Maybe we'll end on this. This is from JM. What can or should non-farmers with lawns do to transition their lawns to grow crops?
Oh, let's see. To transition your lawns to grow crops, huh? Well, I would say solarize it. The lawn, I mean, if you're going to do that, and then put some plastic down that ends up killing that, you'll probably let it rise back up, do it again, and then get your seed ready, get an annual cover down, and allow that to kind of start to take the place of that lawn. If you let it just go, then you end up seeing a lot of weed development and things that you don't necessarily want to that until the system stabilizes. And then do not till the soil. That is one of the worst things you can do, is tilling that soil up. So figure out a way of sowing seeds directly into the soil and mulching those in order to maintain control of the plant community and things like that. So that's what we do here on Blue Dasher.
And by the way, Zebulon, who spoke with us, Farrell, several months ago, has a website on what he calls polyculture paddocks. And a paddock would be what we'd call a lawn area. He's not talking about a paddock for livestock. He's talking about what you can do. And he actually has a really good set of videos that you could go watch, JM, about how to convert, again, a lawn area into something growing edible crops. And he does, again, very little after prepping the soil, like Jonathan just described, to provide, almost what you'd think about in a row cropping. Instead, it's a highly diverse cover situation that will then, don't worry about weeds that you call them, because they'll get out competed over time, maybe take several seasons. But then he has a combination of turnips and greens and berries and a variety of others that are all growing in this one area. And he has walkways, just like you'd have in a certain circumstance, but no real rows. And there's no, as Jonathan said, no tilling, because you just want that soil to get rich, and you want those microbes that live near the surface typically to stay near the surface, and don't till them down and get rid of them, which is the biggest mistake that people make. And I made it all the time in the past until 15 years ago. So
it was conventional knowledge, that's for sure.
yeah, that's what it was. So JM, you said, could you say his name again? I'm not sure who you meant by that. Zebulon. Zebulon Farrell. And you can watch one of his presentations. He's actually done a couple with us on our system, and it's free. So just go into eatcommunity.com and go back and watch one of his presentations. Well, Jonathan, this was so fun. I probably only host about 1 out of 3 of our presentations anymore. I have a group of young people, and I just said, I'm going to host this one today. I really wanted to spend time with you, so I've appreciated that. You are certainly welcome to come visit us here. And if you're in the area in a month or so, let's just stay in touch and figure out how to do that. I'd love to come visit you at some point in time. So.
All right, sounds real good. Thanks for having me. It was sure nice to meet you and talk to everybody.
Sounds good. All right, Mark, why don't you take us out?